Good day, viewers, and welcome to the Scope Newscast. I'm Evan, signing on. If you are watching, that means you are an 8th grader at Rising Star Middle School and are either freaking out about exams, relieved that you have finished exams, or mentally hitting your head on your desk because you flunked an exam. However, before we begin, please keep your masks on during the duration of the show. Now, we have many topics covered today, but first, a brief weather report from John.
Thanks, Evan. Right now it's 57 degrees and sunny here in Fayetteville, Georgia, which is located in the Piedmont region. There are 5 regions in Georgia: the Piedmont, Coastal Plain, Blue Ridge, Appalachian Plateau, and Ridge and Valley. There are also 159 counties in Georgia. In the 3 northern regions, it's about 45 degrees, and they can expect some snowfall during the week. Those upper regions actually have snowfall as a common occurrence, especially on the Appalachian Mountains because they're mountains. The Appalachian Mountains are in the Blue Ridge region. The largest and most southern region is the Coastal Plain. However, the Piedmont region has the highest population, mostly because it hosts Atlanta, Georgia's capital. The Piedmont and Coastal Plain regions are separated by the fall line, which is a change in elevation that creates waterfalls when rivers like the Savannah and Flint pass over it. The Coastal Plain also hosts the Okefenokee Swamp, which is a huge marsh-like swampy plot of land that hosts a large variety of wildlife. Georgia's neighboring states are Florida, Alabama, Tennessee, North Carolina, and South Carolina. Georgia is located on the upper left hemisphere and is in North America. We are part of the United States. Ports in Savannah and Brunswick have helped us to transport goods, and numerous rivers have given us a constant flow of water when we first settled. The 14 barrier islands off the east coast in the Coastal Plain region have temperatures ranging from 57 to 64, with the largest barrier island, Cumberland, having a temperature of 62. The most northern barrier island is Tybee. Back to you, Evan.
Thank you, John. Now, please enjoy this next installment in our Time Warp series with Ivan.
Hello. Welcome to Time Warp. I'm Ivan, and today we will be talking about the colonization of Georgia. But first, you should know of a man named James Oglethorpe. This man had a friend who was thrown in debtor's prison because he could not pay his bills. This man, Robert Castell, died because of the harsh conditions and smallpox. Oglethorpe wanted to prevent this, and so the idea of Georgia was born. He went to the king to convince him to create a colony for the poor, but James knew that the king had no interest in helping others, so he told the king that Georgia would be for 3 things: economy, defense, and charity. Georgia would grow cash crops for Britain, specifically the rice crops: wine, rice, indigo, silk, and tobacco. They would defend South Carolina from the Spanish threat to the south, and they wanted to help the poor, as Oglethorpe wanted. This made up what was known as the Charter of 1732. On November 17, 1732, the Anne sailed from Great Britain to Georgia. Georgia was settled on Yamacraw Bluff, which was held by the Yamacraw Indians, led by Chief Tomochichi. Mary Musgrove helped to translate, and they made a deal with the Indians, and so they got the land and began to work. Citizens could only own 50 acres, and they all had to be ready to defend South Carolina. Everyone had to grow rice crops, vineyards, olive trees, and mulberry trees. Georgia was a trustee colony, so all rules were made by 21 trustees, which included James Oglethorpe. Slavery and alcohol were outlawed, and women could not inherit land. This period, known as the trustee period, lasted for 20 years. In 1752, Oglethorpe was called back to Britain, and the royal governor's period began. The government became a bicameral legislature, and land ownership became 200 acres. Alcohol was allowed, and slavery was permitted in 1750. This was while the trustees period was still going on, and it was changed because of economic pressure from South Carolina and the malcontents, or the unhappies, who were constantly complaining. Jews who were not allowed were taken into the colony of Georgia to provide a doctor, along with the Highland Scots and Salzburgers, who helped with agriculture and manufacturing. The Highland Scots also helped with the Georgia militia. So there you go, a shortish explanation of the colonization of Georgia. Thank you for watching Time Warp. We'll see you next time.
That was inspiring, Ivan. Now we shall really take you back in time. as we allow you to enjoy a previous scope-breaking newscast that was filmed in 1776. Breaking news. The Declaration of Independence has been signed, and the fighting with Great Britain is to stop. For years now, the American Revolution has raged the land after Great Britain angered the colonists. In the French and Indian War, which was the French Indians versus Great Britain, battle broke out in the Ohio River Valley over fur trading rights. The war lasted for 7 years, and England won, but they were bankrupt. They created the Treaty of Paris, which diminished the Spanish threat, and Georgia's boundaries were expanded. To pay for the war, Great Britain began to tax us. They passed the Tea Act, which put a tax on tea, along with the Stamp Act that put a tax on paper. Boston retaliated with protests one day, and a group of British soldiers shot at a group of peaceful protesters. This painting was created by Paul Revere, who named this event the Boston Massacre. The colonists saw this and were angered, which helped to spark the Revolution. To punish Boston, Great Britain passed the Intolerable Acts. The Quartering Act, which forced citizens to house and feed British soldiers at their own expense. The Impartial Administration of Justice Act, which made anyone who committed a capital crime be shipped to Britain for trial. The Boston Port Act, which closed the Boston ports. And the Massachusetts Government Act, which banned town meetings and gatherings. Georgia didn't retaliate to these unfair acts initially. They liked the king. He gave them land and protected them. But when they learned how the British troops were openly firing on unarmed Americans, and when their governor was unfairly arrested, revolution fever began to take hold. The fighting started on April 19, 1775, in the Lexington and Concord battles, beginning with the first gunshot nicknamed the shot heard round the world. The British thought that they had a lot more support in the South, but when they set up a camp near Augusta, Georgia, a surprise attack was launched on them, and the Patriots won greatly. This was later known as the Battle of Kettle Creek, and it boosted morale quite a lot. The French teamed up with the Patriots to take Savannah back, but went straight into a trap, and despite being outnumbered, the British won and kept Savannah until 1782. The war ended with the Battle of Yorktown, where we were finally able to claim victory. Our first constitution, the Articles of Confederation, are to be written. Spoiler alert, they don't work. They give the states too much power to prevent having an overly powerful central government. But that means the Congress will not be able to raise money through taxes. Each state can have their own currency, and Congress will have no power to control trade. Plus, any federal laws will have to be enforced by the states, and the articles cannot be amended unless it is passed by every state. It's gonna be a long 4 years. This is Evan, signing off. Man, I wish I was still that young. Now, it's time for a routine fun fact that everybody already knows. This week's fact is that the War of 1812 started in 1812. We seem to run out of facts, just like the Americans ran out of war names at that point. Before this, UJ was established in the late 1700s. It was one of the first schools that not only wealthy people could afford to attend, but also the poor. It also admitted girls and African Americans quicker than many schools. During some of this period known as the Westward Expansion, William McIntosh ruled the Creek Indians, and he had a bit of a reputation for siding with the Americans, even those people felt like he should side with them. He also signed the Treaty of Indian Springs, which gave the remainder of Creek land for $200,000 without checking with their council. This angered the Creeks, and they ordered for his execution. He was killed in 1825. As more Indian land became Georgia land, a new way to distribute land had to be used. The headright system was first used, where people were granted a specific amount of land based on who they were and how many people they lived with. Later, we had the Yazoo land fraud, where people attempted to sell more land than existed. When the colonists found out, they were furious. Finally, the land lottery system was used, where people were given a random plot of land. Also during this period, the Industrial Revolution happened, and the cotton gin was invented in 1793. People could produce cotton to be made into fabric and clothing much quicker, and while this may all sound good, it increased the need for slaves, especially in the South. During this time, the railroad industry also grew, which is why Georgia's capital was moved to Atlanta. As the population moved west, a gold rush began, and standing right in the middle of it or as some might have said right in the way of it, are the Cherokee Indians. Many people wanted to kick these Indians right out of Georgia, but they couldn't just do that. Instead, through many disputes, battles, and court cases, specifically Worcester versus Georgia, where the Supreme Court ruled that we could not create regulations for these people on Native American land. Despite the order, President Andrew Jackson refused to comply with it. Soon, the Cherokee Indians were forced off their land and had to march out of Georgia in a bloody and exhausting walk, later known as the Trail of Tears. I'm afraid that's all we have time for, so you can go back to worrying about exams. On behalf of the entire team that made this week's episode, I'm Evan.
I'm John.
And I'm the one and only Ivan.
Thank you for tuning in, and we hope we see you again next week on Scope.